the ballast to the bomb. She came back as the CEO of his downfall attention. If you don't want to miss a single second of this story of betrayal, ruthless ascent, and cerebral revenge, I implore you to subscribe to our channel. Give us a solid like, and drop your comment right now with your first impressions on Amelia's masterstroke. The ballroom gleamed like a sea of diamonds and arrogance, and Ethan Blackwood was the king of his small, perfect world. His new wife, Veronica Cole, was a trophy on his arm, and his success felt inevitable. He chuckled thinking about the woman he'd left behind, his simple, unambitious ex-wife. He pictured her clipping coupons in a minuscule apartment. But suddenly, the music stopped. Severe, imposing security guards began carving a path through the crowd. Ethan felt annoyed, shoved aside like a nobody, until he saw who they were clearing the way for. The woman who stepped out of the Rolls-Royce wasn't just his ex-wife. She was a queen, and the crown she wore, he had unknowingly handed her 2 years ago. The Declaration. Arrogance in the Crystal Ballroom. The grand charity gala at the New York Public Library's Celeste Bartos Forum wasn't merely an event. It was a statement. It was a place where old money reluctantly mixed with new, and where men like Ethan Blackwood could measure their ascent. Tonight, Ethan felt he had finally arrived. He adjusted the silk lapels of his Tom Ford tuxedo, a smug smile on his lips. Beside him, his wife Veronica was a vision in a shimmering, backless Vera Wang gown that had cost more than his first year's salary. Her diamonds, a recent gift from him, caught the light from the massive chandeliers, scattering fractured rainbows across her skin. "Darling," Veronica purred, linking her arm through his. "Robert Jennings is waving at us. His firm just secured the new tech IPO." Ethan nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "Of course, let's not keep him waiting." Ethan Blackwood was a man sculpted by ambition. He was senior vice president at a mid-tier private equity firm, a position he'd secured not only through ruthless networking, but also by marrying Veronica. Her father, Lawrence Cole, was a titan, a man whose name opened doors Ethan had once only peeked through. Tonight, Ethan wasn't just Ethan Blackwood. He was the son-in-law, the chosen one, the man who had successfully climbed. As they navigated the crowd, Ethan accepted compliments easily. He loved it. He loved the smell of expensive perfume, the clinking of champagne glasses, the quiet, desperate hum of networking. His new life was perfect. It was solid, expensive, and shiny. It was everything his old life was not. His old life. The thought surfaced like a bad taste. His old life had a name, Amelia. He allowed himself a brief, dismissive thought of his ex-wife, Amelia. Simple, quiet, brilliant in her own bookish way. The woman who had proofread his MBA thesis. The woman who had managed their tiny budget so he could afford the right suits for his interviews. The woman who, ultimately, just hadn't been enough. He'd told her 2 years ago in the beige living room of their rented apartment. "I'm moving on, Amy." He'd delivered the words with clinical cruelty. Us, it's just not ambitious enough. I need more. You're comfortable." "Comfortable?" she'd repeated. Her voice hollow. "You're happy with coupons and spreadsheets. I want this." He gestured vaguely toward the life he now possessed. He had left her, and thanks to a prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on when he got his first big bonus, she was left with very little. He'd heard through rumors that she was working some entry-level data entry job, living in a small studio in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood. The thought provided a dark, satisfying punctuation mark to his own success. He was here. She was there. The natural order of things. "Ethan, darling, are you listening?" Veronica's voice brought him back. I said Robert is talking about the merger. Absolutely, sweetheart. He refocused his corporate smile, snapping back into place. He was bonding with Robert Jennings, laughing at a joke that wasn't funny, when the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a change in pressure. The murmur of conversation near the grand marble entrance quieted. Then, a line of men in impeccably tailored dark suits and clear earpieces strode into the room. They weren't venue security. They were private. They moved with silent, imposing efficiency, creating a wide, clear path from the door to the main dais. "What on earth?" Veronica muttered, annoyed. "They're blocking the way to the bar." Ethan frowned. Certain prominent guests, including Veronica's father, were asked to step aside. "Excuse me, sir. Ma'am, please clear the aisle." The tone was polite, but non-negotiable. Ethan felt a flicker of indignation. He and Veronica were also ushered aside by a man whose jaw looked carved from granite. "Who the hell do they think they are?" Ethan muttered, adjusting his tie. "Must be a politician." "Oh, how tedious," Veronica scoffed. The room was now bisected by this invisible wall of security. All eyes turned to the entrance. The string quartet, performing live music, faltered for a moment. A black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled up outside, its engine a whisper. A driver rushed to open the rear door. The first person to emerge was a man whose presence sucked the air from the room. Ethan recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Marcus Sterling, the reclusive, legendary tech billionaire. Sterling hadn't been seen at a public event in 5 years. He was the white whale of investors, a man who built and dismantled entire industries from his private island. A collective gasp swept the gala. Veronica's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's him. Dad has been trying to get a meeting for a year." Ethan's heart hammered. This was an opportunity. If only he could utter one word. Marcus Sterling paused beside the open car door, but didn't move. He turned, an unusually soft expression on his face, and offered his hand to the passenger still inside. A black stiletto heel, simple and lethally elegant, stepped onto the pavement. Then, a leg disappearing into the sleek lines of a sapphire blue Armani dress. The dress was not ostentatious. It was structural, powerful, and utterly refined. The woman who emerged was not beautiful in the same way Veronica was beautiful. Veronica was a decoration. This woman was a statement. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant bun, revealing simple diamond studs. Her makeup was minimal. Her posture was perfect, and her gaze was unwavering. She took Marcus Sterling's hand, and Ethan Blackwood's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was surprisingly loud in the sudden silence, but Ethan didn't notice. He couldn't breathe. Veronica, oblivious, whispered, "Who is she? Is she his wife? I've never seen her. She's so plain." Ethan's voice was a dry croak. His perfect, shiny world had just cracked in half. "That," he whispered, his blood turning to ice, "is Amelia." Interactive moment and CTA. The impact was brutal. Could the plain Amelia be the key to this mystery? What secrets does this new woman hold? Share your theories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to find out the shocking truth. Ballast and the Architect of Pain, 2 years ago. The smell of stale coffee and cheap toner. Amelia stared at the stack of overdue bills on her particle board desk, all addressed to her. Ethan, in his surgical extraction from their marriage, had been meticulous. The car was in his name. The condo was in his name. Joint accounts had been systematically drained to pay shared debts she didn't even know they had, mostly from his new, expensive lifestyle. He had left her with her personal savings, $428, and a pile of tax forms from the consulting work she had done to support him, for which she was now liable. She was 34, held a master's degree in financial mathematics, and was applying for data entry jobs that paid $18 an hour. The breakup itself had been a masterpiece of psychological cruelty. It hadn't been a fight. It had been a performance. Ethan had sat her down, not on their worn couch, but on a hard dining chair he had dragged into the center of the room, as if for an interrogation. "Amy, I'm going to be direct because I respect you," he'd begun, a lie so blatant it hurt more than the truth. This isn't working. She had braced herself. She'd seen it coming. The late nights, the smell of Veronica's Santal 33 perfume on his suits, the way he had started looking at her not with hatred, but with something worse. Pity. "You're not growing," he'd continued, pacing. "I'm on a rocket ship, Amelia. I'm headed for the stratosphere. And you? You're ballast. You're comfortable." That word again. Comfortable. It was the word he used for her old-fashioned loyalty, for her refusal to play corporate games, for her belief that their partnership was about more than his career. "I built your career, Ethan," she'd said, her voice shaking. "The algorithms you used in your pitch to KKR, they were mine. The financial model that got you your promotion, I wrote it on our honeymoon while you were scuba diving." He had the audacity to look hurt. "Don't be petty, Amelia. We were a team. But teams change. The league gets bigger. You just don't have the killer instinct. Veronica's father, Mr. Cole, sees my potential. He wants to cultivate it." "Veronica sees your potential, you mean?" Ethan had sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "See, this is what I'm talking about. This smallness. You're thinking about cheating. I'm thinking about legacy." He told her he was moving out. He told her his lawyer would be in touch. He told her not to make it messy. "I'm giving you a clean break, Amy," he'd said, standing by the door, already looking like a stranger in his expensive suit. "It's a chance for you to, I don't know, find someone on your level. Go back to school. Whatever you people do." "You people." The door had closed. She hadn't cried. Not then. She sat in the hard chair for 3 hours, the silence of the beige apartment pressing on her. The life she had built with patience and love, the career she had sacrificed for his, had been packaged up and taken away like rented furniture. He hadn't just left her. He had erased her. For 6 months, she spiraled. Rejections from investment banks were polite, but firm. "While your academic background is impressive, Ms. Vance, a 2-year gap combined with your previous position in, well, nowhere, makes you a difficult fit for our fast-paced environment." She was too old to be an analyst, too green to be a VP. She was trapped in the professional purgatory he had designed for her. She finally took the data entry job. It was humiliating. Fluorescent lights buzzed. The stale coffee was free. She sat in a cubicle farm, and while keying in numbers, her brilliant mind screamed. One night, sipping cheap vodka from a coffee mug in her tiny Brooklyn studio, she was scrolling LinkedIn. She saw Ethan's ascent, a picture of him and Veronica smiling at a finance 30 under 30 event. His post was full of cliches, incredibly humbled, blessed. "Huge thanks to my team and my mentor, Lawrence Cole." Amelia stared at the screen. The fog of her depression, the gray numbness, suddenly burned away. It was replaced by something white-hot. It wasn't just anger. It was fuel, ballast. She whispered to the empty room. "I'll show you what ballast is." She turned off the television. She logged off LinkedIn. She opened the laptop she'd bought with her first data entry paycheck. She pulled a dusty textbook from a box, stochastic processes and financial futures. She wasn't applying for more jobs. She was going to create one. She remembered the algorithm she had written for Ethan, the one he had claimed as his own. It was good, but it was basic. It was a toy. In the 2 years since, she had ideas. Big ideas. Ideas about predictive modeling for high-frequency trading, about identifying systemic risk before it cascaded. She worked from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. every night. Her data entry job paid her rent and her servers. She ate ramen and drank black coffee. She didn't date. She didn't see friends. She coded. She tested data. She built a model. After 3 months, it was functional. After 6, it was brilliant. It could analyze global market chatter, regulatory filings, and shadow banking systems to predict a market shock event with 94% accuracy 2 weeks before it happened. She called it Cassandra. She didn't send it to a bank. She didn't put it on her resume. She packaged her findings, a concise 20-page white paper showing how her model would have predicted the last 3 flash crashes, and sent it to one person. She sent it to the private, encrypted email of Marcus Sterling, the only man in the world who would understand, the only man who saw finance not as a game of golf, but as a war of information. She didn't expect a reply. She went to her cubicle the next day, her eyes burning, and keyed in her numbers. 2 days later, at 11:04 a.m. Her burner phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Ms. Vance? The voice was quiet, gravelly, and unmistakable. Marcus Sterling. Your math is elegant. My jet will land at Teterboro Airport in 90 minutes. Be there. The line clicked dead. Amelia stared at the buzzing fluorescent light above her desk. She logged off her terminal. She grabbed her cheap coat. She didn't say goodbye to her manager. She walked out of the building and never looked back. Teterboro tarmac was windy and gray. A Gulfstream G650 waited, its engines idling with a low, powerful hum. Amelia, clutching her laptop bag, was the only passenger. The flight attendant, who looked more like a senior diplomat, offered her champagne. Amelia asked for water and a notepaper. When she landed in this Caribbean, where Sterling kept his private innovation hub, a team was waiting for her. They weren't bankers. They were quants, data scientists, and 2 former NSA cryptographers. Marcus Sterling met her in a simple glass-walled office overlooking the ocean. He wore a linen shirt and shorts, looking more like a retired beach hippie than a man who could buy countries. Cassandra, he said, tapping her white paper on his desk. It's predictive. It's clean, but it's reactive. I don't want to predict the collapse, Ms. Vance. I want to be the one to cause it, or the one to prevent it. Can you do that? Amelia, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline, didn't flinch. Yes, but I need access to real-time global trade clearing data, not the 24-hour delayed feeds. I need the raw feed from SWIFT, DTCC, and the major exchanges. Sterling smiled. It was a cold, appreciative smile. I have that. For the next 18 months, Amelia wasn't a person. She was a mind. She was forged. Sterling gave her unlimited resources. A black card budget and a team of 20 geniuses. He was a brutal, brilliant mentor. He tore apart her assumptions, pushed her to think bigger, and taught her the language of real power. Loyalty is a currency, Amelia, he told her one night over a game of chess. Don't spend it on bankrupt people. He taught her about leverage, about how the real money wasn't in stocks. It was in debt and logistics, in the structural weaknesses of over-leveraged firms. She learned. She absorbed. She rebuilt Cassandra from the ground up. It was no longer just a predictive model. It was an X-ray of the global economy. It could see the stress fractures in a company's foundation, the hidden debts, the executive dependencies, the political risks. It was a weapon. 6 months ago, she presented her first major finding to Sterling Global Ventures. We've been focused on acquiring tech. We're wrong. The real opportunity is in logistics and the mid-tier private equity that funds it. Specifically, firms with high exposure to European port regulations. She put a name on the screen. Monarch Capital. Monarch Capital, she explained. Looks robust. It's run by Lawrence Cole. It has a solid reputation, but Cassandra shows it's dangerously over-leveraged. 90% of its portfolio is tied up in shipping companies reliant on a single trade route, one that is about to become politically destabilized. Furthermore, its entire executive management is a nepotism trap. She clicked to the next slide, a picture of Ethan Blackwood smiling on a finance blog. This is Ethan Blackwood, the COO. He's also the founder's son-in-law. His risk management strategies are non-existent. He's been cooking the books, not illegally, but unethically, reshuffling assets to hide the core portfolio weakness. Monarch Capital is a house of cards. When this trade route is renegotiated in 3 months, they won't just stumble. They will implode. The board was silent. So we short them? A VP asked. No, Amelia said, her voice cutting across the room. Shorting is messy. It's a gamble. We acquire them, or more accurately, we acquire their debt. Right now, it's still rated A+. We buy it for pennies on the dollar through shell corporations. When they default, we don't just take their assets. We take the company. We take their board seats. We take everything. Marcus Sterling had watched her, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he simply said, "Executed." Amelia spent the next 3 months orchestrating the most complex, silent, hostile takeover in modern history. She bought Monarch Capital's debt from dozens of different holders, masking the purchases so Cole's alarms never went off. 2 weeks ago, the trade deal had collapsed, exactly as Cassandra predicted. Monarch Capital's portfolio went into freefall. Margin calls began. Yesterday, Lawrence Cole had woken up to find that his primary creditor, a mysterious holding company based in the Cayman Islands, was calling in his entire $9 billion debt. A debt he couldn't pay. The holding company, in turn, offered a total acquisition solution. That holding company was, of course, Sterling Global Ventures. The acquisition was finalized that very afternoon. Tonight's gala was coincidentally the perfect venue to announce it. The charity's board was full of Cole's allies. Sterling had insisted Amelia accompany him. "You built the weapon, Ms. Vance. You should be there to watch it fire." She had hesitated. "I don't know, Marcus. It seems petty?" he asked. "No, it's closure. You're not going as Marco's ex-wife. You're going as the new CEO of Sterling European Operations. The position is your reward for this." So she had agreed. She had put on the Armani dress Sterling's personal shopper had sent her. She had looked in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the comfortable Amelia. It was someone new. Someone forged. Someone who understood ballast. She had realized with a cold, clear certainty that ballast wasn't what kept the rocket tethered. It's what gave it stability before launch. Ethan had simply released it too soon. Final interactive moment and CTA. Amelia's ingenuity is lethal. Do you think this hostile acquisition is fair revenge or a calculated power move? How do you think Ethan will react when he sees his world collapse? Comment your expectations and like and subscribe for the final blow. The Queen presents herself. Cutting silence. The moment Amelia stepped onto the marble floor of the ballroom, the silence that had fallen stretched, becoming thin and taut. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. Marcus Sterling, the kingmaker, had arrived, and he had brought an unknown queen with him. Amelia walked with a stillness Ethan had never seen. Her pace was measured. Her gaze wasn't nervously taking in the glamour. It was directed, focused, and completely, terrifyingly tranquil. She wasn't overwhelmed by the room. The room was overwhelmed by her. Ethan stood frozen, the broken pieces of his champagne glass at his feet. A waiter hurried to clean it up, but Ethan didn't notice. Amelia, he breathed. The name felt foreign in his mouth. Ethan, who is she? Veronica insisted, her voice now high with irritation. She tugged his arm. Do you know her? How do you know her? Is she one of your old assistants? The insult, which would once have amused Ethan, now made his stomach clench. Amelia and Marcus Sterling were moving. The security detail moved with them, a discreet, protective bubble. They weren't walking the perimeter, socializing, as Ethan had been. They were walking directly toward the dais, where the event organizers and the mayor of New York were waiting. The mayor, a man Ethan had been trying to get a picture with all night, rushed to greet them. He shook Sterling's hand, then turned to Amelia, his expression one of deep respect. Ms. Vance, the mayor said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. A pleasure. Your work on the new Urban Tech Fund is revolutionary. Mr. Mayor, Amelia's voice responded. It was the same voice, the same soft timbre, but the hesitation was gone. The upward inflection of uncertainty she'd always had was replaced by flat, declarative confidence. Thank you for having us. Marcus and I are eager to discuss the next phase. Ms. Vance, Marcus and I. Ethan felt a wave of dizzying vertigo. This wasn't possible. This was a nightmare. Maybe he'd eaten a bad oyster. Veronica, however, had processed the scene and arrived at a different, more cynical conclusion. Her painted lips curled into a sneer. Oh, I see, she hissed to Ethan, her voice dripping venom. Your little mouse of an ex-wife. She cleaned herself up, got a makeover, and hooked Marcus Sterling. My God, she's a gold digger. A gold digger. Ethan clung to the explanation. It was the only one that made sense. It was the only one that kept his world intact. Of course, Amelia, bitter and abandoned, had used her looks, what little she had, and played the damsel in distress, catching the biggest whale of all. She wasn't powerful. She was a parasite, but on a bigger scale. The relief was so profound he almost laughed. That's it, he muttered. She's with him. That's all. Pathetic, Veronica sneered. And he's so old, but still a billionaire. I guess even a 4 can become a 10 with that kind of money. Well, don't you dare speak to her. It's humiliating. But Ethan couldn't look away. He was obsessed. He needed to watch her. He needed to confirm his new theory. He needed to see her fawn over Sterling, to see the obsequious, dependent woman he had left. He watched her as she stood on the dais. She was talking to a senator and the CEO of J.P. Morgan. She wasn't fawning. She was informing them. The men were leaning in, listening. Sterling stood beside her, not as her protector, but as her partner. He nodded at something she said, an expression of genuine approval on his face. The world tilted again. I need a drink, Ethan muttered. He broke away from Veronica, heading toward the bar, his path intentionally taking him near the dais. He needed to get closer. He had to hear. As he neared a security guard, the same one with the granite jaw, the man placed a polite but firm hand on his chest. I'm sorry, sir. This area is reserved. I'm Ethan Blackwood, he said, his voice strained. I'm with Lawrence Cole. The guard's expression didn't change. This area is reserved, Mr. Blackwood. Ethan was a guest. He was a VP, and he was being blocked. He looked past the guard. Amelia was only 20 feet away. She turned her head slightly, her eyes sweeping the room. For one thrilling fraction of a second, their eyes met. Ethan saw no recognition, no pain, no anger, no longing. She didn't see Ethan, her ex-husband, the man who had destroyed her. She saw a man in a tuxedo, standing where he shouldn't be, being turned away by security. She held his gaze for half a second, and then she looked through him. She turned back to the senator and continued her conversation. That, more than the Rolls-Royce, more than Sterling, was the blow that shattered him. It wasn't that she hated him. It was that she didn't see him at all. He had been relegated from ballast to mere, irrelevant background noise. "Ethan!" Veronica was hissing from across the room. "What are you doing? You look like a stalker. Get over here." He stumbled back, his face burning with a shame so deep it tasted like acid. His perfect night, his perfect wife, his perfect life. It all felt like a cheap imitation, a child's drawing next to a masterpiece. He rejoined his wife, his smile now painful frozen mask. She looked right through me," he whispered, horrified. "Good," Veronica snapped. "She should be ashamed of showing up here. Now straighten your tie. My father's coming. He looks upset." Ethan looked up. Lawrence Cole was indeed striding toward them. But he wasn't upset. He was terrified. His face was pale, his hands were trembling, and he was staring wide-eyed at the woman on the dais. "Lawrence, what is it?" Ethan asked. "It's her," Lawrence Cole whispered, his voice cracking. "The one on the acquisition papers. The holding company. Vance. A. Vance. It's her." Ethan didn't understand. "What are you talking about? She's not with Sterling, Ethan." Lawrence choked, his hand gripping Ethan's shoulder so hard it hurt. "She is Sterling. She's the new CEO. She's the one who, God help us, she's the one who just bought my firm." The blood didn't just drain from Ethan's face, it evaporated. He felt faint. The sound of the string quartet suddenly muffled, as if he were underwater. "What? That's not possible," Ethan stammered. "Bought, Lawrence? We just posted our best quarter. The board was thrilled. I finalized the reports myself." "The reports were lies, Ethan," Lawrence hissed, his voice a poisonous whisper. He dragged Ethan and Veronica into a secluded alcove, his eyes wild. "You and your creative accounting. You redistributed the shipping portfolio debt. You didn't hide it. You just consolidated it. You made it a single, perfect target. I stabilized us. You made us easy to kill," Lawrence choked, looking about to vomit. "They didn't buy the company, you fool. They bought the debt, all of it. The margin call came from a single entity this morning. CG Ventures. I thought it was a competitor. It's a Sterling global shell company. And the signatory on the final execution was A. Vance." Veronica, for the first time, looked truly scared. Her flawless makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. "Dad, what does this mean? What are you saying? Tell them to stop." "You don't tell Marcus Sterling to stop," Lawrence spat. "He doesn't buy you. He strips you bare. God, Amelia." Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Amelia. His Amelia. The woman who alphabetized his spice rack. The woman who cried during commercials. She couldn't have orchestrated a multi-billion-dollar corporate raid. "It's a mistake," Ethan insisted, clutching at a burning straw. "It has to be a facade. Sterling is using her name. It's a cruel joke. He found her, learned she was my ex-wife, and he's using her to humiliate me." Lawrence Cole stared at him with dead, vacant eyes. "You really are that stupid, aren't you? He's not using her. He promoted her." "Look at them." The three peered out from the alcove. The main presentation of the night was beginning. Marcus Sterling had stepped onto the stage to a thunderous ovation. "Thank you. Thank you," Sterling said, his voice quiet and powerful. "It's wonderful to be back in New York. I'm not usually one for parties, but tonight is a special occasion. Sterling Global has just completed a major acquisition, one that positions us to revolutionize the global shipping and logistics industry. It was a move orchestrated by a mind I can only describe as one of the most brilliant I have ever encountered." Ethan felt his entire butt seize up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling continued, It is my profound privilege to introduce you to the future of my company. The new CEO of Sterling Global Ventures European Division, Ms. Amelia Vance. Amelia stepped to the microphone. The applause was deafening. She didn't smile, not at first. She just stood there, owning the silence. "Thank you, Marcus," Amelia said, her voice amplified and echoing through the grand hall. Her eyes swept the crowd, lingering for a chilling moment on the alcove, where Ethan, Veronica, and Lawrence were hiding. 2 years ago, she continued, her voice even and clear, I was told I was ballast, something heavy to be discarded when the payload was ready for launch. Tonight, I'm here to demonstrate that the ballast was, in fact, the material that built the weapon. She paused, and the silence was total. Monarch Capital's assets will be restructured. Its operations will be managed by a team that prioritizes integrity over vanity. We will clean out the rot, and I'd like to announce that the executive team responsible for creating this unsustainable debt structure is, as of this moment, terminated. Ethan Blackwood swayed on his feet, feeling the air rush out of his lungs. He was fired. Publicly. Humiliated at the height of his pride. His perfect life, bought with cruelty and lies, was over. Amelia's eyes, cold and precise, found his in the shadows. This time, she didn't look through him. She looked at him. And in that look, he saw not hatred, but a final, complete, and utterly devastating closure. She offered a small, cool, victorious smile. She lifted her champagne flute, a fresh one, pristine, and raised it, not to the crowd, but directly to the alcove. A private, final toast. "Thank you," she finished, her voice ringing with finality. "Now, let's get back to the charity." The end. The ultimate CTA. That was the end of Ethan Blackwood's world. What do you think was the most satisfying part of Amelia's revenge? Was it the public firing, or the look she gave him? Comment below. And for more incredible stories of comeback and triumph, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. The triple expansion, the aftermath, and the architecture of closure. Scene 1. The shattering glass. Ethan's immediate collapse. The last echoes of applause for Amelia's speech died down. But the air in the alcove where Ethan, Veronica, and Lawrence were hiding remained thick with the stench of ozone and disaster. Ethan was no longer swaying. He was rigid. The words, "as of this moment, terminated," were not just professional jargon. They were a death sentence to his carefully constructed identity. She can't do this," Veronica whispered, her voice cracking with terror, not anger. Her hand, clutching Ethan's sleeve, was slick with nervous sweat. "Daddy, tell them it's illegal! You're Lawrence Cole!" Lawrence, however, was past fury. He was in a state of terminal shock. He leaned against the cold marble wall, his eyes fixated on the dais where his ex-son-in-law's ex-wife now stood, beside the legendary Marcus Sterling. "She already did it, Ronnie," Lawrence muttered, his voice hollow. "She didn't buy the firm. She bought the debt. She bought the right to fire us. Legally. Cleanly. That's why Sterling is here. It's a clean sweep. She is the CEO." Ethan finally moved, pushing away from the wall. His mind, the same mind that prided itself on ruthless calculation, was grasping for a lifeline. Wait. The reports. I filed the Q3 reports this morning. They were fine. The board signed off on the debt consolidation. I minimized the exposure to the port route. "You minimized nothing!" Lawrence roared in a sudden, desperate burst of energy, grabbing Ethan by the lapels. "You centralized it! You put all the risk in one basket to make the books look prettier for your bonus. You told the board we were diversified, but Amelia, Ms. Vance, she found the single trade route dependency and bought the whole thing through the back door. She didn't just fire you, Ethan. She used your own cleverness to execute the takeover. The realization hit Ethan with the force of a physical blow. His pride, the exact, smug certainty that had allowed him to dismiss Amelia as ballast, was his undoing. He hadn't just been fired. He had been outsmarted by the quiet woman he left crying on a dining chair. He saw the security guard with the granite jaw approaching the alcove. This time, the guard didn't even speak. He simply pointed toward the side exit, his expression conveying utter contempt for the three figures huddled there. Veronica, realizing the public humiliation was about to escalate, tugged frantically at her father. "Dad, please, before they call the police, let's go." As they were ushered out through a staff corridor, away from the glittering hall, Ethan stole one last look back. He saw Amelia. She was laughing now, a genuine, relaxed laugh, as Marcus Sterling leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She looked light. She looked free. She looked exactly like the woman he had stopped her from becoming. His Rolls-Royce Cullinan, the very model that had brought Amelia here, was parked under the entrance awning. His own Mercedes-Benz S-Class, which he had driven with such pride, was already being towed away from the VIP section. "My car," he mumbled. "They can't tow my car." "It's corporate property now, you idiot!" Veronica screamed, her flawless facade completely broken. "They fired you! They took your parking space! They took everything!" As they were forced into a taxi, speeding away from the opulent life he had just lost, Ethan looked at his wife. Veronica, in her ruined Vera Wang gown, was sobbing uncontrollably, blaming him loudly for her own impending financial distress. He realized the cold truth. Her love, their life, was just a transaction. A very expensive, now worthless, transaction. He finally understood Amelia's last look. It wasn't revenge. It was a surgical observation of an unstable asset being liquidated. Scene 2. The Architect and the Mentor. Justice versus vengeance. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Amelia had gracefully moved away from the microphone, accepting quiet congratulations. Marcus Sterling guided her to a private salon overlooking the main floor. The room was sparsely furnished but quiet, a calm eye in the storm they had just unleashed. "You handled the announcement with grace, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, pouring her a glass of water. "But the last look, the toast to the alcove, that was for you, wasn't it?" Amelia took a long sip, her composure unshakable. "That was for the Amelia who sat on the floor 2 years ago, thinking ballast was the most accurate description of her worth. And what about the Ethan Blackwood who is currently being driven away in a taxicab?" Amelia sighed, a small, tired sound. "I spent 18 months building Cassandra, and 3 months executing the takeover. All of it was necessary. All of it was logical. But when I saw his face, not the anger, but the shock of a man who realized he'd made a $9 billion error in judgment, I felt nothing." She walked to the window, looking down at the stream of cars leaving the event. "I thought I wanted to see him burn, Marcus. I thought I wanted the vengeance. But the only thing I felt was closure." Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Justice and vengeance are two sides of the same trade. Justice reclaims the stolen asset. Vengeance consumes the thief. You chose to liquidate him cleanly. Why? Why the mercy of only firing him?" Amelia turned back, the sapphire blue of her dress catching the subtle light. "Because his cruelty was his own cage, Marcus. He defined himself by what he acquired. When he fired me, he stole my ambition and dignity. But he left me with something more valuable. 0 debt and a quiet mind. I was free to rebuild. If I destroy him now, I become defined by his ruin. My freedom ends where my vengeance begins." She tapped her chest. "My real victory wasn't the acquisition of Monarch capital. It was proving to myself that I could build something colossal, not out of bitterness, but out of pure competence. That is the antithesis of the transactional life he leads. That is the final nail in the coffin of his worldview, not his career. Marcus smiled, a rare, genuine expression of respect. Brilliantly reasoned, Amelia. The ultimate leverage is indifference to the outcome of the opponent. You didn't seek his destruction. You sought your own liberation. And the acquisition, Amelia added, a spark of dry humor in her eyes, was a necessary piece of logistics. Monarch Capital is structurally unsound, but the asset base is excellent. We will restructure and rename it. No more Monarch. We need a name that reflects integrity and mathematics. What did you have in mind? Amelia met his gaze. Equitas, she stated, using the Latin word for justice and equilibrium. Justice in balance. That's what we built. Scene 3. Equitas, the liberation. The next day, Amelia stood in her new office, the executive suite that had once been Lawrence Cole's. It was a vast space overlooking Central Park, but she barely noticed the view. The movers were removing the last of Cole's ostentatious furniture. She held the original copy of her Cassandra white paper. It was creased and slightly coffee-stained, a relic of her time in the buzzing cubicle farm. She remembered the exact moment Ethan's cruelty truly crystallized her resolve. It wasn't the initial breakup. It was 3 weeks later. She had called him, desperate for a few extra days before she had to move out, her voice breaking. Please, Ethan, just until the end of the month. I need time to find a sublet. His voice, cold and distant, had replied, Stop being sentimental ballast, Amelia. My lawyer said you need to vacate. I'm hosting a dinner for the Coles here on Friday. Don't make me send security to your apartment. Sentimental ballast. She carefully placed the white paper in a simple locked drawer, a reminder of the humble beginnings of Equitas. Her new personal assistant buzzed the line. Ms. Vance, a delivery for you. It's the Tom Ford tuxedo, sir. It seems to have been dry cleaned. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Send it up. A few minutes later, the dry cleaning bag was delivered. Inside was Ethan's pristine Tom Ford tuxedo, the one he wore that fateful night, with a small, neatly folded note tucked into the pocket. It was from Ethan, scribbled hastily on a cocktail napkin. I found this in the car. It was always yours. The suit, the firm, the ambition. I am sorry, Amelia. You are not ballast. You are the architect. Amelia looked at the tuxedo, a garment symbolic of the life she was supposed to covet. She didn't feel triumph, only a quiet finality. He had finally seen the truth, but it was far too late. She picked up her phone and dialed the property management for her former apartment building in Brooklyn. Hello? I would like to pay the next 6 months' rent for my old unit, apartment 4B. Yes, pay it anonymously. For the next tenant. Please send them a note saying, Welcome to your launch pad. The ballast has been jettisoned. Now, fly. She hung up, looked at the Tom Ford suit, and tossed it into the large, empty cardboard box marked for donation. Her revenge was complete. Her liberation was absolute. She wasn't just the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm. She was the CEO of her own destiny. 5 years passed since the seismic event at the gala, and the name Equitas Ventures, formerly Monarch Capital, became synonymous with integrity and disruptive success in global finance. Under Amelia's leadership, the firm became known for its mathematical ethics, only investing in companies whose balance sheets and social impact were demonstrably sound. The architect's ascent. Amelia Vance never looked back. She didn't need to. Her focus remained purely on building the Equitas legacy. She funded scholarships for women in quantitative finance, established research hubs for ethical AI in investment, and became the reluctant face of a new generation of power, one defined by intellect, not inheritance. Marcus Sterling officially retired 2 years after the takeover, leaving Amelia as the sole CEO of Sterling Global Ventures, an organization now run entirely on the principle of competence over comfort. In his farewell note, he wrote, "You have taught me, Amelia, that the quiet mind is the most valuable asset. The only true revenge is building something indestructible." The fate of the ballast. The collapse of the Cole family was swift and complete. Lawrence Cole lost the majority of his personal fortune liquidating Monarch's remaining liabilities and faced civil lawsuits from minority shareholders. He retreated to a small, isolated property in the Hamptons, his once feared name now only whispered as a cautionary tale of nepotism and poor management. Veronica Cole filed for divorce from Ethan 3 months after the gala. Stripped of her father's support and her entitlement, she attempted to leverage her social connections, only to find that status, once lost, rarely returns. She became a minor Instagram influencer, selling discount codes, a bleak parody of the expensive life she once commanded. And Ethan Blackwood? He spent a year unsuccessfully fighting his termination and desperately trying to salvage his career. Blackballed by Sterling Global's pervasive influence, he couldn't hold down a job above middle management. 5 years after being the king of the ballroom, Ethan was working as an analyst for a small, struggling logistics firm in New Jersey. One afternoon, he was reviewing his firm's quarterly regulatory filings and noticed a pattern of aggressive debt acquisition by a shell company. He recognized the mathematical signature. The debt was being acquired by Equitas Ventures. He wasn't being targeted for revenge. His current firm was simply an unstable asset, due for liquidation as part of Amelia's routine. Impersonal market clearing. He didn't fight it. He didn't call Amelia. He didn't even mention her name to his colleagues. He simply finalized the transfer documents with clinical efficiency. As he walked out of the office for the last time, Ethan looked at his reflection in the glass window. He saw a tired, middle-aged man who had gained everything by trading authenticity for ambition and lost it all in one night. He finally understood Amelia's last look and the quiet power of Equitas. He wasn't a villain in her story anymore. He wasn't even a plot device. He was just a numerical error that she had neatly corrected. That was his final, silent punishment. Utter, complete irrelevance.